Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. My name is Steve Goldsmith, and along with Gore Risby, we direct the Innovations in American Government program at the Ash Institute. We're delighted you could join us on this beautiful day in Boston. In a moment, I'm going to turn the program over to the chairman of the National Advisory Group, David Gergen, who's occupied that position relentlessly and for decades. We're now in our 21st year of these award programs. This year's award applicants was one of our largest pools and the deepest in terms of quality that many of us have seen in a very long time. Ford originally endowed these awards for a couple reasons. One, to honor public officials who are doing an exemplary job. A second, to send a signal to the public that government can indeed work effectively and innovatively, and to increase the public's support and recognition of the benefits of democratic governance. So with that, we've spent the morning reviewing many of the proposals and listening to experts talk about them. We have a really terrific National Advisory Board. You've been distributed information about them, but former public officials and management experts of renown in the country. And with that, I'll turn the program over to David Gergen. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Steve, and hello again, everyone. We're delighted, privileged that you have joined us here at the Harvard Kennedy School for this finalist competition. And to underscore, Steve, the judges have been meeting all morning and hearing from the site evaluators. And this is going to be a very tough set of decisions by people here. And your presentations here today will make a difference. In past years, we've seen some people we thought were going to win drop out, and we've seen other people just rocket up because there was something about their presentation that was so compelling. An individual was there was a life story of some sort, someone whose life had been changed, that made a real difference in the minds of the judges. So this next, it's altogether too brief when you hear, when you speak, but it's very revealing for us. And you'll get a series of questions, and if you could be concise, get to the point to allow more questions. Sometimes people who bring the debative style of Washington to a place like this in 10 minutes, you can find that there are about 14 things you left out because, it takes a long time for station identification and everything else. So the more you can get to the point, the more I think it will help yourself. As you know, we had about 1,000 applications this year. We've winnowed that list down with the help of excellent evaluators to the 15 groups that are represented here. There will be 5 innovation awards from this final 15. There will also be one award that will be named after the Annie Casey Foundation, which, as you know, does a great deal of work on children and family systems. And some of the groups there are some groups here that are in fact competing for either one. They could be an Innovations Award or an Annie Casey Award, but know that there are at least 3 and possibly more candidates for that Annie Casey Award among all of you today. Now we have, as Steve said, we have an outstanding group of judges, a couple of whom are new this year. They represent diversity, which is some parts of the diversity are obvious, but they also represent geographic as well as one might say ideological or sort of leanings one way or the other. There's a lot of diversity in that sense as well. So it's a very good group, and it's a very congenial group. Most of us have worked together for a number of years on this program. This is the 21st year of this program. And the Ford Foundation, which started it, deserves an enormous amount of credit for its foresight in doing this. And we've been happy at the Kennedy School that the program migrated here, but we continue to look to the Ford Foundation as providing a lot of the guiding spirit behind the program. So let's go around briefly and introduce the judges. Well, the judges will introduce themselves. Maria, do you want to start?
Sure. Maria Chaveste. I lecture at the University of California, Berkeley Law School, and also was former government official in the Clinton administration. Bio's in the book. I'm happy to be here.
Ron?
I'm Ron Kirk, a partner with Vincent and Elkins Law Firm. I was mayor of Dallas, Texas for 6.5 years and Texas Secretary of State under Governor Ann Richards.
Bill?
I'm Bill Klinger. I'm a senior fellow at Johns Hopkins University and a former member of Congress, served as chair of the Government Reform Committee, which some might say is an oxymoron, but we actually did do some reforms from time to time.
I'm Nancy Johnson. I'm a senior policy advisor at Baker Donelson, served in the Congress for 24 years, and chaired the Ways and Means Health Subcommittee in my last 6 years.
I'm Carl Weisbrod. I'm the president of Trinity Church Real Estate, one of Manhattan, New York City's largest property owners. And I spent more than 3 decades in urban and economic development in New York City and New York State, principally overseeing the redevelopment of Times Square and Lower Manhattan before and after September 11th.
I'm Tony Williams, former mayor of Washington, D.C., and have been in different levels of government now for about 25 years.
I'm David Osborne. I'm the author of a number of books about innovation in government, including Reinventing Government, and I'm a partner in a consulting firm called the Public Strategies Group.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, and I'm an adjunct professor at Georgetown and former lieutenant governor of Maryland.
And we want to point out, if you have a chance to have the
yes,
water
which
here.
I did point out.
Yes, that it says Keeper Springs, an environmental project by Robert F. Kennedy, Jr.
So drink my brother's water.
And I'm David Gergen. I'm a refugee from Washington, and I'm here I'm a professor here at the Kennedy School, and I have the privilege of directing our Center for Public Leadership. So let's get started. We will march through this with as much vigor as we can. Please know that you have 5 minutes to make a presentation. Then we do have a timekeeper for the remainder. And Morgan, where's Morgan? Right, can you stand up and show everyone what we're dealing with? Morgan's an essential person here. He doesn't speak, but he speaks quietly. Okay. We will, just to know this, we're going to try to stick to this. There may be a time when we're involved in a line of questioning, or one more person has a very brief question, and it will be at my discretion. Then we may extend for a minute, but we understand as a matter of fairness that it's not fair to let one program go 15 minutes and another program to go 8 or 9 or 10. So we do like to try to keep it as clipped to the 10-minute mark as possible, and we will have breaks as we go. But first up, let us welcome to the podium to discuss the Intelligence Community Civilian Joint Duty Program, Mike McConnell, who is the Director of National Intelligence in this country, and Ronald Sanders, who is with him, I believe, or are you? You are here. And he is the Associate Director of the National Intelligence for Human Capital.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm delighted to be here. I also am a refugee from Washington. The point of my presentation is this community, my community, the intelligence community, has a vital mission to support the nation, protect the nation. We failed the nation at 9/11. Many commissions and many reviews, and so we have to change our activities and our practices so that we would not allow something like that to happen again. Context. The first spy master was George Washington, but think about that. The first spy master was George Washington. The United States public does not trust or embrace spies. It's a dichotomy in our system. Let me go to World War II. We weren't ready. We ultimately were breaking German code, breaking Japanese code, and we put agents behind the lines. We served the nation well. When that story is fully told, it'll probably say something to the effect that we shortened World War II by 18 months, if not 2 years. Pretty vital contribution. Cold War, we were going to take it apart. The best thing that happened to us was Khrushchev banging on the podium, "We will bury you." It was a national struggle, or a struggle for national survival. In a bipartisan way, we created a community that could look inside the Soviet Union And what we did was capture the technological advantage and the high ground, think space. We got up high, we could look down, see and understand. We served the nation's policymakers by keeping them informed about what was going on to a sufficient level they could make decisions that ultimately defeated the Soviet Union. Fast forward again, disassemble the community. Remember, we don't like spies, they cost a lot of money, we're not fully embracing and trustful. So we started to take this community apart. We weren't prepared for new threats, new age. Al-Qaeda looked at us as a community and said, if we can get attackers inside, they will be invisible, because that's the way we organized ourselves, and that's what they did. All the lessons learned said we have to create a community that focuses on today's threats. It has to be innovative, integrated, and collaborative. This community today consists of 16 agencies, 6 departments, and it's a little bit like herding crickets, because every secretary has a prerogative and a set of rules and authorities and regulations. He also has an oversight committee and an appropriating committee, which is very want to protect those prerogatives. So the challenge that we were given is, how do we integrate and force collaboration across a community of 16 agencies in a way that would make us a viable community, to think of community as opposed to individual agency. We had grown up as insular agencies focused on a discipline, and we were not very good at sharing that information outside the boundaries. We looked at, for examples, where did this happen before and how did it work? Legislation, 1986, Goldwater Nichols. Goldwater Nichols required the military to embrace jointness. How did they do that? If you don't have jointness in your resume, you don't get promoted to flag officer, general, or admiral. All of a sudden, the agencies, the services embraced it. Every service chief under oath testified, if you pass Goldwater Nichols, it will ruin the United States military. One cycle, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, every service chief stood up and said, best thing that's ever happened to the United States military. So what we tried to do is get these 6 departments and 2 agencies, 16 individual agencies to agree. It took us 2 years. We have now a single integrated management performance system. We now reward performance. We call it pay for performance. So it's unified across the community. You don't get promoted to senior level unless you leave your parent agency and serve in a different part of the community. That lets you have new colleagues, new awareness, new understanding, and you go back to your parent agency better informed and more apt to have colleagues and an understanding of what's required to share information. So once we worked through that and got agreement, and one of the key people to help us do that was the Secretary of Defense, Bob Gates, who, remember, served as, in my position, as the Director of Central Intelligence, so we understood this need. And when he came in and we had a chance to review this, after 2 years of debate, we came to closure. So we're in a better place, and we've added a final emphasis in this innovative approach, 360-degree appraisals for all of our seniors. That means subordinates, seniors, peers, which often turns out to be the most important, and clients or customers. Review our performance and feed that back so people understand how they're being perceived and what it takes to make this community work. What it takes is integration, collaboration. We hope we're there. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Questions? Bill Klinger.
Yeah, as I understand it, they're assigned, people in this track are assigned to one other intelligence agency outside. Is that sufficient, do you think, to give them the kind of the broad system-wide sense of the intelligence community?
Probably insufficient, but necessary as a start. What we're also doing is having individuals serve in a joint environment where they are engaged in activity across a wide spectrum. Probably the best example of that today is in Baghdad or in Kabul or Islamabad. And in that environment, Army, Navy, Air Force, CIA, NSA, FBI, all the various 3-letter agencies are working in a collaborative environment. They tend to be young. Half of our community came in after 9/11. So what we want to try to do is capture that. So if we know to get promoted, you got to serve outside. And we're rewarding that kind of behavior through our 360. we hope to perpetuate it across the community.
So you put this into place in response to 9/11. Could you describe how, if this had been in place before 9/11, we would not have had such a disaster?
There was a significant level of information available to us before 9/11, and if we had shared it and analysts had looked at it across boundaries, we probably would have been successful in preventing 9/11.
There have been a legendary sense that the Defense Department is almost its own intelligence operation, and the State Department has its own intelligence operation. So I assume what's happening here is someone from Langley might go and work for Defense.
That's correct.
Someone from State might go and work in Langley.
And
Vice
National
versa.
Security Agency and so on. That's the idea.
Yeah. So does are you far enough along to get any sense? It's hard to evaluate the impact so far. You've had 1,500 people that participate.
Right.
Are you far enough along to see whether walls can come down, whether people can begin to think of themselves as belonging to a larger single community?
It's too soon to predict success, but having been in the military and observed it in Department of Defense, when it is a precondition of promotion to senior level, then the employees embrace it. They know it's a requirement. So that will be the forcing function on the one hand. On the other hand, what we find, particularly where these joint operations are occurring, people expect that behavior. I mentioned half of our folks came in after 9/11. They come to this enterprise believing in sharing, and they're helping us break down some of these walls. So too early to tell, but all the signs are positive.
Boss, if I may.
Yeah.
Frankly, our poster child in this, and I think an evidence that we will succeed, is the National Counterterrorism Center, a creature of the Intelligence Reform Act, bringing all of the counterterrorism assets of the country together in one place to fuse intelligence. FBI, CIA, DIA, they are all assigned on joint duty to this entity, and the information sharing there is quite remarkable, and obviously with great import to our national security.
Please, Carl.
I realize this is still a program in its early stages, but do you have any sense of how promotions into the senior executive ranks are currently being affected by this program?
Currently too soon to tell, but when in defense it became a requirement, and there was a procedure for a waiver. The biggest battle in getting us to closure, who could do the waiver? Who could say this person can be promoted to the senior level without the benefit of joint experience? So in the final analysis, I can offer a waiver as the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense, no others. So that will be the forcing function. So we have confidence based on the DOD experience that we can make this work.
Tony Williams.
How would you answer the question, well, if Davis Nichols has already done this, in the military, and 9/11 mandated it, how is this an innovation? How would you answer that?
It's never been done across multiple departments among civilians. It was relatively easy, although there was strong pushback in Department of Defense. Even the Secretary of Defense was opposed to Goldwater Nichols and all the service chiefs. Once they experienced it, they embraced it. So we think that we will get a similar embrace. It was arguing who had the authority and who was giving up decision rights to get us to closure. We're there, and the response has been pretty positive.
So a much more difficult context here.
Because civilians and multiple
you.
agencies.
Okay, thank
yes,
you.
sir.
And I'm sorry, Nancy Johnson.
Just to follow up on that, then Nichols Davis did not propose any cross-agency sharing.
Goldwater Nichols did not.
Structure. And so is this, to your mind, a first?
It is a first, yes,
in
ma'am.
the federal bureaucracy?
First in the federal bureaucracy, and what we hope is, and there's a study already going on, if we are successful, the interagency process will probably start to embrace this as the right way to do it going forward. And there's a study looking at that now.
Yeah, Dr. McConnell and Ron Sanders, I'm afraid our time is up, but I do want to thank both of you for coming. I also want to underscore how helpful, how important it is when the head of the agency shows up. It sends a real signal to the judges that this is a program it's very serious within the group, and that your personal weight is behind it, your personal leadership is tied into it. So we do thank both of you for coming.
Thank you, sir, very much. Appreciate it.
We move now to the state of North Carolina, the Learn and Earn program, and representing that program will be the president of the North Carolina Community College System, Scott Rawls, and James Blackwell, who is a May 2008 graduate of the Earn and Learn High School. Thank you both for coming.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Rawls. I'm president of the North Carolina Community College System. We're the third largest community college system in the nation.
My name is James Blackwell. I'm a recent graduate, 17 years old, of Learn and Earn High School in Durham, North Carolina, on the campus of NCCU Central.
And on behalf of Governor Mike Easley and the people of North Carolina, we are proud to present Learn and Earn. Learn and Earn is an innovative government initiative, but beyond that, it is a movement in North Carolina to radically transform high schools and promote college opportunity and access for all of our students. And we both believe it is deserving of this award because of our personal experience, although we're not members of the panel, obviously. Learn and Earn is raising the expectations and the engagement of high school students throughout our state. And in a time when what you earn is more so than ever before based on what you learn, we believe that there are few government initiatives that could have greater life-changing or community-changing impact. Learn and Earn is a coordinated three-pronged attack on high school disengagement, dropouts, low aspirations for college attainment. It's in three different ways. First, Learn and Earn high schools. Throughout North Carolina now, this past year there were 42 Learn and Earn high schools. Next year there will be 70, located on college, community college, and university campuses. They serve a majority of first-generation students like James. Through these programs, students enter in the 9th grade, and they participate in a rigorous academic but also workplace-relevant curricula. And in doing so, they also attain college credit through the college courses as well as high school courses. And with only one additional year after their high school, paid for entirely at state expense, they're able to attain either an associate's degree or up to 2 years of university transferable credit. Now we're also bringing the benefits of Learn and Earn broadly to all the high school students in our state through Learn and Earn Online, a program in which community college faculty and university faculty provide college courses in facilitated, technology-enriched high school environments. And then the third element is the Earn Grants. Through these programs, Learn and Earn students have a guarantee, but also other low-income and middle-income students know that they can attain and go to college and be able to graduate from college debt-free from the Earn Grants. Now, if we were able to take you to North Carolina today, we think we could show you the engagement and the excitement around this program. But given that we can't do that, we thought we would bring the future of North Carolina to you today. And I'll turn it over to my friend James.
On May 17th, I had the distinctive honor of being a graduate of the inaugural class of the Learn and Earn High School on North Carolina Central's campus, a member of the UNC system. I graduated with 2 years of university credit. And in the fall, I will be attending North Carolina Central University, pursuing a degree in history, completing my 2 years. What the Learn and Earn program does, it creates pride and love in our community, and it brings the community closer. For many of me and my friends, the thought of going to college was a daunting task because we were unsure if we could afford to pay for a 4-year university. But what the Learn and Earn answers for us is that we can go to college for free and we can gain our education because we know that we can compete on the college level. But the question that Learn and Earn has answered for us is how will we pay for it? Learn and Earn has also cut the dropout rate. Many of my friends would they have went to a regular high school, quite possibly would have fell through the cracks and dropped out. But what the Learn and Earn gives us is hope and love that we can all graduate and we can walk across that stage and gain our diploma. It strengthens the community. And the great differences between a Learn and Earn high school and a regular high school is that in many regular high schools, the difference is it's based around the social aspect and it's based around having a great time. But at a Learn and Earn high school, it's based around having a good time, but it's stimulated by everyone is motivated to get their education, everyone is motivated to graduate, and everybody is motivated to break above that glass ceiling that we see that restricts us and to achieve our dreams further in the future.
James touched on the personal impact, but he also touched on the community impact. And what we've also seen is that Learn and Earn is infusing a different approach to education throughout our high schools, even on our college campuses by these connections. And it's also changing our community's perspective about the importance of education and how it relates to our economic future. I was a president at a college where we started a Learn and Earn high school program. That Learn and Earn was a catalyst for a community event that takes place each year now in my home community, where the economic leaders, the elected officials, and the education leaders now meet once a year to discuss our education opportunities and our economic future and how those things tie together. Thank you for having us today.
Thank you very, very much. Questions? Yes, sir, David Osborne. Well, why don't we hold our applause till the end each time of the whole presentation. Thank you, David.
I understand from the write-up that your schools are smaller than normal and they have higher academic standards. But what wasn't clear was, is the learning process organized any differently than a traditional high school, or is it pretty much classrooms with desks and you have 6 periods a day and so on, like a traditional high school?
Let me answer broadly and then let James give his personal experience, but it's absolutely designed to be different. One of the design principles is based on purposeful design to be different. It's based around project-based learning. It's based around technology. At the Learn and Earn on our college campus, every student had a laptop, thanks to support for private donation. But it's based on rigor, and it's based on engagement and personalization with students. So for most, it is about a difference in learning. And that's what's, I think, exciting about the infusion throughout our educational community, are those design principles that are changing our outlook on education.
And for me personally, graduating from Learn in High School, it's a change in the minds culturally, because at many institutions, like I stated, it's just around having a great time. But at my Learn in High School, it was based around everybody coming together to gain that education, everybody coming together to do and to achieve more than they were given when they were born, and to go beyond what they even think they can go beyond and achieve more.
Yes, Maria?
How are students chosen for these Learn and Earn high schools?
In many cases, they're chosen by lottery with an attempt to reflect the diversity and the demographics of their local community. That being said, though, there's also a very deliberate attempt at Learn and Earn schools to go out and, through working with middle school counselors and others, to identify students who may potentially be at risk, or students who could achieve more in a different type of academic environment. So while there's a selection process that is based on lottery, there's a very deliberate attempt to target low-income students, students who may be first generation.
Well, I guess the follow-up is just, is there any sense that somehow the Learn and Earn high schools are taking sort of the cream based of the middle-class student, the middle school students who have that potential and just need a different environment to succeed?
Well, we do believe we have the cream, but in that regard, many of our students are not students who may, in the normal sense of what people's mindsets are the cream. We are actually deliberately trying to bring in those students. 63% of the students in 2006 and 2007 were first-generation college students. So, no, we're not bringing in the cream in that outlook, if that's what you're referring to.
Mr. President, I have one question. I think it's a fabulous program. We follow a lot what you're doing in North Carolina with your community college system, but I'm concerned you've grown awfully fast to 30 camps. I think you said you're going to be in 70 next year. Do you have any concerns at all in terms of funding keeping up with the interest in the program? Is the legislative support going to be there to continue to
absolutely
sustain it?
The Learn and Earn started through our governor and has that top level of leadership. But our legislature and our governor have made that commitment. I mean, the special funding for Learn and Earn is approximately $170 million. Those are recurring funds that are built into our budget. And so there's a tremendous commitment that is there to get us to that level. But there's also what's happened as well is at the local level, at local community colleges, at local public schools, there's now, because we see the movement, we see the changes, the local funding that is coming in, as well as the private sector support to support it as well. So we're quite confident that we can achieve our goals.
The one issue that has come up among us is whether we're ready to make an evaluation yet of its impact, because it's such a young program. James is part of the first class to graduate. How should we think about that?
Well, we are very involved in looking at the metrics. In fact, we have a very detailed performance metric system, and you can go to a website now and look at the performance of each school. But I do think we can declare success. For instance, 96% of all our ninth graders are passing relative to mid-80s for the rest of the schools. And we know it locally. I'll give you an example. I was back in my former community last weekend, and the math instructor from the Learn and Earn saw me, ran up to me, and pointed out to me, said that our ninth graders this year, every student not only participated and completed Algebra 1, but they passed the test for Algebra 1. Now, that's a big deal because those students will now move on into Algebra 2 and to higher level math. And as he pointed out, many of those students never would have expected that they would have been able to do that without Learn and Earn. So yes, it is an early program. Yes, we are forming those metrics, but we see those successes. So we feel confident that you could evaluate us at this point in time.
Thank you. One brief final question.
Yeah, just following on David's question, do you have any data about graduation and dropout rates so far, and also test scores?
Well, this is the first class. James represents the first class to graduate. What I can tell you is this, is that if you look at our Learn and Earn high schools, approximately 50% of those schools serving low-income students have had 0 dropouts. That's remarkable when you look at a statewide, and this is a national problem. We're not alone, but statewide where you have a 68-69% graduation rate. So we know it's having an impact in terms of dropout rate as well as achievement rate. But this is the first graduating class in that regard, so there is more work to be done in terms of evaluation.
Anything on test scores?
Well, in terms of completion of test scores, we have a very detailed process. I indicated to you in terms of the 96% of our ninth graders are moving on to 10th grade, and we have a very involved end-of-grade testing program. So we know our students are moving forward based on that testing relative to the national or the statewide average.
Terrific. Thank you. Scott Rawls, James Blackwell, we thank both of you for coming. And to underscore, just as I did earlier with Director McConnell, it always helps to have someone who's actually been impacted by the program come and testify. James, we are particularly want to congratulate you on your success, and we wish you well as you go forward. And it doesn't hurt that we share the same hometown. So we move on now to the Global Maritime Domain Awareness. Did you guys bring slides or pictures? Do we have anything to look at? We saw some
recovering from
fascinating
PowerPoint
slides and pictures this morning. But we have Lee Metcalf and Paul Brubaker here from the United States Department of Transportation, I think. Right, you're both representing the Department of Transportation.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm delighted to be here for 2 main reasons. One is I finally get to tell my parents that I got into the Kennedy School, even though it's just for 3 hours.
Well, listen, now that you're in, would you like to make a contribution?
I'll start getting letters from the Alumni Association, right? And secondly, though, and more importantly, is to celebrate what we think is a really innovative and transformational program. That the U.S. Department of Transportation, in conjunction with the United States Navy, took the initiative and developed something called the Global Maritime Domain Awareness Application, which is a commercial, off-the-shelf application consistent with the tenets of the Clinger-Cohen Act, which I was delighted to be involved with, working for
you pulled that one out.
Senator Cohen at the time. But this application really represents how applying the tools and transparency of the information age can enable unprecedented cooperation among U.S. federal agencies, but also among global nations to enable unprecedented visibility, security, and management of global freight shipments. Global Maritime Domain Awareness has already provided dramatic improvement in visibility, transportation, and cooperation on the high seas as participating nations have seen substantial value through information sharing on an open, accessible platform. I like to refer to this as a wiki on the waves, much to the annoyance of some of my staff, but this wiki also permits dramatic improvement in maritime traffic flow, which I think is the real promise behind this, much in the same way, if you can envision this, much in the same way that we manage the global air traffic. This enablement is really going to improve supply chain performance across the globe. It's going to reduce shipping costs. It's going to save fuel costs and reduce fuel consumption. lower greenhouse gas emissions, and reduce port-related congestion and bottlenecks that currently plague our global supply chain and our global ports. The Volpe Center and the United States Department of Transportation are proud to have played a role in developing this critical transformation program, and Admiral Metcalf is going to give you additional details. Admiral?
Proud and delighted to be here. I'm Lee Metcalf, the Director of the National Office of Global Maritime Situational Awareness. How's that for a mouthful? I'm having the ultimate out-of-body experience. I'm a Navy guy over in the Coast Guard headquarters over an interagency organization which can't succeed without international cooperation. The challenges have been interesting. In this less than a year we've stood up, but in that framework of implementing the national goals for information sharing in the maritime domain came this opportunity to take one category of information, AIS data, basically transponders on large ships, and find a way to make that go more effectively around the world. What we went to the Department of Transportation to do is ask them to build something simple, something that was easily acceptable, and that was scalable. And they did just that. What's happened is no less than an epidemic of information sharing. What we pressurized the system to do was to keep it open, to allow maximum shareability of that data. And with everybody who has concerns around bits and pieces of where data goes and how it gets shared, this was a breakthrough moment that even 2 years ago, there were only 5 countries that were willing to participate, as the Navy philosophy was not allow there to be terms and conditions for sharing. If you're in, you put your information in. If you don't want it to share with everybody who's a member, they're out. And what happened was, now we have partners like Greece and Turkey sharing this data, organizations like India and Pakistan. And so that transformation is evolving from the 5 countries 2 years ago to 40 countries now, and another 40 that are evaluating for formal review. The international community has picked it up, and we now have an international sponsor in the IMO level called the International Agency of Navigation Aids and Lighthouse Administration, but they are connecting the dots. We now have entities like China and worldwide partners that are looking at this as a transparent, coordinated effort for information sharing, albeit helping us see the haystack that enriches not only Mr. McConnell's mission to find the threat, but to be Department of Transportation and all other missions across the U.S. government for safety, environment, and commerce. With that, we'll take your questions.
Carl?
This is quite impressive, and it's amazing what you've done. How do you see its applicability and replicability in other areas? I mean, I appreciate the ongoing growth of the program around the world and the inclusiveness of hopefully all nations, but how do you see this being applied elsewhere or in other contexts?
Well, there are a couple of things to keep in mind. One is the operation of the global supply chain is multimodal. It's not just the operation on the sea, but it's also operations on the roads, on the rail, even in the air to a certain extent. So once we break the paradigm and engage in this level of international global cooperation on visibility into the supply chain, we can begin to open up information sharing to other domains and other modes so that we can actually chart the movement of goods from origin to destination, no matter what mode it uses.
The other part of that is that the simplicity element. It's just a laptop and a password with a level of integrity, and you're in. And so the applications are opened up very wide to be able to include more categories of information. As you saw this morning, when you pop up, you got the 23 pieces of information. There's more to go beyond that.
Do you have any other? We have nothing here that we can show to everyone else.
I don't know that they wired it to be able to pull that up.
Yeah, we didn't prepare to bring that here. I know that we demonstrated it to you folks.
Okay, another time, Nancy.
How good is this system at identifying sea traffic that is illegal or not under a mast, that you wouldn't want to be there or you'd like to know is there that shouldn't be there?
Understood. And that ultimately, the aim is to be able to analyze the data and make sense out of it. there's two phases to MDA. One is make the information discoverable. In other words, in this case, to be able to see the haystack, in this case, a portion of it. And then the next is to turn that information over to organizations like Mr. McConnell's, who analyze other kinds of pieces, pull them all together, and realize we have an anomaly here. And systems and tools that are actually being attached to what you saw this morning, MSSIS, that increase the ability to see those anomalies quickly, because as you can see, tons of contacts now are viewable. How do you start to make sense of the data and find the needle in the haystack? This is a piece. Other tools are being added to this to help go to find threat indicators, but also the cross-modal issues. How do you just find the just-in-time information to be able to hand off at the shipping lane so that you don't have all those ships arriving 2 days early and making time outside when you have accidents and things?
Bill Klinger, one of the originators of that legislation.
I would be impressed with the program, even if it had nothing to do with the Klinger-Cohen Act, but I'm glad it did. I guess the one thing I noted in the application was that there was a concern about the lack of a formal governing body over this operation. Is that going to be addressed in some way, or do you feel it is a detriment or a drawback?
Well, what I alluded to a second ago at the international level, although I got a little food fight going on with trying to find interagency funding mechanisms to bring together this effort. But quite frankly, the entire infrastructure we're estimating is going to be between $2 and $3 million a year. And so between an international consortium we're trying to bring together under the IALA and our own coordination between DOD, DOT, and DHS, we think we'll find the balance and the right governance mix that will oversee what needs to be seen to help this thing evolve.
David Osborne.
In your application, you said that this would make the world safer. And I get the argument about the supply chain and efficiency. And we, this morning, heard some anecdotes about ships carrying illegal aliens or drugs. And I get the use there, but I still can't quite see how this makes the world safer. And I wonder if you can connect those dots for me.
You want to take it from the risk management perspective, or do you want to?
Security and safety. So from a pure safety point of view, IALA is telling me this is giving them data around information associated with accidents and other dimensions in some of our ports around the world. So managing shipping lanes more effectively, et cetera. In the security dimension of that, it is a piece. It is a front edge. It is seeing the haystack that's enabling more work to be done and better understand what's out there. It is clearly at its infancy and being able to say, here is literally where a bad guy is or something's happening. It has to be fused with other kinds of data that Mr. McConnell's organization would bring into the play. It clearly, all by itself, doesn't open the door to finding the key issue that is a threat that's coming our way.
Although there are some things that are very clear. For example, piracy on the high seas is an issue. And if we know the origin and destination and cargo that's in a ship, particularly origin and destination, we can tell how a ship is tracking and is it engaged in unusual movements. And for that reason, we can, manage the risk and interdict ships that may be acting a little unusual or a little more suspicious.
It's actually creating new constructs between commerce and navies, ours in particular. What is our outreach? LNG management, high visibility targets around the world. How do we know where they're at and when they're in harm's way, and how do we respond to those more effectively? This literally just creates the aviation model grid, if you will, or in the maritime environment.
Let me ask this final question. I was very impressed to read in the evaluation that previously the Navy could track 66 ships around the Mediterranean, but not in real time. It might take hours or weeks. And now they can track 10,000 in real time. That's an obvious dramatic jump. But I still wasn't sure if you're less than 100 tons or if you don't put the transmitter on your ship, whether you can slip the system or not. If you're smuggling drugs or people or whatever.
The challenge associated with trying to find the non-compliant player is still huge. First step, at least be able to network worldwide those who are compliant, because all we had was nationally gathered information and only you saw what you gathered. Now we've got a coordination effort that is sparking more coordination. And it's a simple enough system that with one aggregator, one AIS system off of a country in the coast of Africa, they now get everything around the world. Chile, in a conference we did last December, was amazed that all they had to do was give to get. And they got everything. And it's opened up a whole new dialogue to go after the rest of the picture, an appetite to close the rest of those gaps that clearly we need to see the rest of the haystack.
Great. Admiral Metcalf and Paul Baker, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was. Fresh Food Financing Initiative from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And Yael Lehman, I believe, is that correct, Yael?
That's correct.
Okay, great. And Ken Clothen, is that correct? We're delighted you're both here.
Good afternoon. I'm Yael Lehman. I'm the Executive Director of the Food Trust. 8 years ago, the Food Trust produced a report, Food for Every Child, which documented a connection between the availability of fresh food through supermarkets and death from diet-related diseases. We found that in Philadelphia, the neighborhoods with the poorest access to fresh food had some of the highest rates of death from diseases such as diabetes and heart disease. Since that time, these findings have been supported by additional research. In response to this situation, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania created the Fresh Food Financing Initiative, the first statewide program in the nation to address poor access to affordable food by financing supermarket development. To discuss the initiative in greater detail is Deputy Secretary for Community Affairs and Development, Ken Clothen.
Thanks, Yael. Members of the panel, it's an honor to be with you today. What we've done here is to create a true public-private partnership to deploy $30 million in funds to address the public health needs that Yael cited, but to address them for the first time using the tools of economic development. This partnership involves not only government on the one hand as a funder and private sector entities, business entities on the other hand as the recipients of funds, a typical public-private partnership that we see, but also I think in a very innovative way it involves the nonprofit sector, in this case the Food Trust and the Reinvestment Fund, which is a CDFI, Community Development Financial Institution, each partner doing what it is uniquely positioned to do best in this partnership. And as Yael mentioned, it provides both grant and loan funds to food market operators that are prepared to locate in needy communities and to make certain baseline commitments regarding the provision of fresh foods in their array of products. So what's innovative about what's happening here? Well, first of all, I think we're the only state government that has used the establishment of food markets as a public health promotion initiative. But beyond that, I think there's something bigger here. We're using the tools deployed for one set of policy goals, those of economic development, to accomplish another set of policy ends, those of public health. And that enables us to do this in a way that uses the more entrepreneurial approach of economic developers to promote public health rather than the typical top-down regulatory approach that is most often seen used by health agencies. And I want to stress, in that regard, this is a very hands-off program on behalf of the Commonwealth government. We sort of have our thumb on the scale and set broad policy parameters and indulge or engage in what I would call soft oversight to make sure that certain top-line policy goals like geographic distribution are met. But otherwise, we let the partners do what they do best. What results have we gotten? Well, we have 52 projects funded in 35 communities across the Commonwealth, both urban and rural, $20 million out in loans, $4 million in grants, and over 3,000 projected jobs developed. Now, we need data to look at the trailing indicators to see if communities are being stabilized by this, but everything that we know leads us to believe that, in fact, this is also contributing to community stabilization as well. In terms of the replicability of the program, we know it's replicable because the Food Trust is already doing this now at the municipal level in New Orleans, Chicago, and New York City. But beyond that, I think that this methodology of using the tools of one typical policy approach to solve problems in another policy area, that's really what's replicable here. And we're already starting to do that. Just to give you one example, we're looking in the education area at the use of making renovation in place of existing community schools preferred to building a new school out on the outskirts of a community, usually on a green field. This will enhance walkable communities. It will preserve important anchor buildings in downtown communities. And again, it will prevent the abandonment of buildings that are very difficult to use for other purposes. So that's one example of using one set of tools in another regard. We have challenges, to be sure, in this program. Smaller operators need substantial technical assistance. The Food Trust is prepared to do that. I think we need to help them do more. There are workforce development issues. These jobs are in retail. As economic developers, we typically look askance at retail jobs, and I think there are real issues involved in making sure that there's a good career ladder here. And we have to pay attention to differences between the rural and urban areas. But basically, the program's working, and we have a bipartisan consensus in our legislature to continue it.
Great. Ron Kirk, and then Carl.
Ken, either you or y'all can answer. I think it's a fascinating model. I'm curious, when we were looking at your success earlier, we had a little difficulty to determine how many of your stores were actual new versus retrofits. And I don't know that necessarily is a distinction of merit. And then I'm curious, just because I'm involved a lot on the retail side, on the dairy industry, is there any collaboration among your stores to enhance their buying power so that they can also bring the best value to the consumers that you're serving?
I would say it's about half and half retrofit and new stores. And also the size of the stores. When we're talking about supermarkets, it can be everything from a small corner store to the large supermarket you might see in a suburban area. In some cases, this is really from the ground up. We just opened one up in West Philly last weekend. In other cases, we'll help a small operator just put in refrigeration into his corner store that he couldn't have afforded to do otherwise.
Good. Carl?
Could you elaborate briefly on the relationship between the state and the reinvestment fund? I believe that's Jeremy Nowak's.
Yeah.
Because I'm a little, just to focus on what is the state's innovation here as opposed to funding what is generally recognized as a very innovative reinvestment fund.
Well, the reinvestment fund is essentially underwriting the loans and doing the due diligence on the loans and supervising the payback terms and things like that. The innovation here, I think, is that, it's a significant investment by the state, and it's a recognition that private sector entities like the CDFIs can do some things for us probably better than we could do it ourselves at the staff level.
Is this something where the reinvestment fund came to you and said, we'd like to do this, or where you went to the reinvestment fund?
No, we went to the reinvestment fund. This was an initiative growing out of collaboration between the legislature and the department.
Maria?
You say that this program will achieve, or is directed to achieving 2 different policy goals. And so what evidence do you have that, I'm impressed with whether they're new stores or retained stores or retrofitted stores, but what about the health aspect? What do you know about whether people in these communities are actually buying healthier food and improving their health outcomes?
That's a great question. There have been several research studies recently conducted in just the last few years. Dr. Kimberly Moreland is one of these researchers. She's now in New York, actually. There have been other research studies showing that when a supermarket comes into an area, fruit and vegetable consumption can increase by as much as 33%. What we know, the Food Trust is currently involved in a NIH-funded study. There's a supermarket going into a area near Temple University called Progress Plaza. They've already done the initial survey work, and then after this store goes in, they're going to do surveys again. There hasn't been a supermarket in this neighborhood for 20 years. There's also, the CDC is also interested in funding us to see the outcomes in this as well. But researchers have seen that when supermarkets are put into neighborhoods in other areas, it makes a tremendous impact. I mean, if all you have in your neighborhood is fast food, that's where you're going to eat. When the supermarket comes in, people just eat better.
Tony Williams.
This is a great program, I agree, but how do you answer the question, well, look, I know a city, pick a name where the mayor or a county where the county executive, pushed various buttons and pulled various levers and provided incentives for a store to locate or stay in their jurisdiction. So how is this different from what we've seen in many, many instances?
Well, in one sense, it's a statewide program in a very, very diverse state that has communities as big as Philadelphia and as small as places that you've never heard of, and probably I still haven't heard of after 5 years. But we have great diversity, and one of the things that we're doing here is making sure that these program funds go across that broad spectrum of diversity. The other thing is that this program wraps in the technical assistance aspects, the technical assistance both to operators in terms of what they do, operating now in a new kind of community perhaps, and the financial technical assistance through the CDFI and the department. So it's wrapping together a whole package of assistance that these kind of operators need to pull this off.
So these are stores that, but for this program, wouldn't be there, either retrofitted or rehabilitated or brought in new.
I think that's correct. This is gap financing that's otherwise not available.
Okay.
Good. Well, congratulations to you both, Ms. Lehman and Mr. Cloven. Thank you also for coming here. All right, we move now to the Youth Leadership Advisory Team with Crystal Starr Castro, a founding member of the Youth Leadership Advisory Team from the state of Maine, and Daniel Despard, who's the Director of Child Welfare Services there in the state.
Good afternoon. As you indicated, my name is Dan Despard. I'm the Child Welfare Director for the Maine Department of Health and Human Services. The Youth Leadership Advisory Team, or YLAD as we call it, is an innovative approach to creating positive change in state government by creating a partnership with youth that have been in the foster care system and are no longer, and current youth in the foster system at all levels of the system. Maine, like most states, is in the process of reforming its child welfare system. We've had far too many youth in care. They've stayed too long. They've had too many moves while they're in care, and too few have achieved a permanent family. Changing this is difficult work. We've come to realize that real child welfare reform happens at the casework level. YLAD has fundamentally changed the way we do our casework. YLAD has enabled youth to participate in a democratic process, creating policies that have improved their everyday lives. Through YLAD, we've learned that youth need to live in a family setting where they're loved. We learned that they want caseworkers to help their parents so they can go home. We also learned that they want authentic relationships with their caseworkers where their voices are truly heard. This has all resulted in real practice change, with youth fully involved in their case planning. For example, youth who can't go home with their parents are now asked to identify family members with whom they might live. Another example is youth are now increasingly involved in the court hearings where the most important decisions about their lives are made. These changes empower youth in their own lives, creating a better experience and a better likelihood for success. This approach has resulted in significantly improved outcomes for Maine's child welfare youth. In 4 years, we reduced the foster care population by a third. We've seen the percentage of youth that are adopted out of the system annually increase by 5%, a similar increase in reunification. We've gone from 12% of our foster care youth placed with relatives to 25% placed with relatives. And we've decreased the number of youth that are lingering in residential care from 28% down to 13% today. Administrators like myself talk a lot about data-driven management, and we use the data to improve performance and quality. Any success that Maine has achieved through our child welfare reform efforts has been because we've combined data-driven management with this partnership with youth leaders at YLAP. We didn't really start to make progress in our child welfare reform efforts until we really engaged the youth. They told the human story behind the data. Now I'm going to turn it over to YLAP member Crystal Castro.
Thank you. I was in state care for 6 years and a founding member of YLAT 10 years ago. One initiative I was involved with was the creation of a DHHS policy related to siblings. Like many other youth in care, I spoke out because too many siblings were being separated from one another. There was little effort at reunifying them, and often even visitation was not supported. In my case, my sister was going to be adopted by a family in another state, and I feared that I would no longer be allowed to visit her once this happened. Knowing that there was no policy or legislation to ensure our rights to stay connected. WILAT members brought these concerns to the DHHS commissioner at that time, and we were asked to write the first draft of a sibling policy. Our policy was written with input from youth around the state and turned over to DHHS. Ultimately, after very few changes, our draft became the agency policy, but that's not the end of the story. We knew an internal policy could not enforce sibling visitation rights outside of DHHS in adoption cases, for example. And we needed a law. Understanding this issue, another WILAT leader wrote to the governor, worked with the legislature, and in 2006, a law was passed ensuring sibling visitation rights. This is just one example of how youth are empowered by their involvement in WILAT. When youth enter foster care, we feel like a number. We experience many losses, including family, friends, control over our lives, and even self-esteem. WILAT provides youth in care with a community where we have opportunities to develop leadership skills and create the changes that will benefit us and other youth coming into the system after us. Because WILAT provides youth leadership opportunities and a sense of belonging, we become more willing to try, increasing our personal successes and strengthening our ability to make choices. These experiences encourage us to take control over our lives and rebuild our self-esteem. WILAT is a model that other state and federal child welfare agencies can benefit from. Already our work has been shared with states such as New Hampshire, New York, Virginia, and the National Resource Center for Youth Services Youth Adult Partnership Academy. WILAT provides an opportunity for real change. It gives youth a sense of hope and commitment to take action for a better future. Although I am no longer in care, I continue to support WILAT because of its efforts to improve the lives of other youth in care. Our nation needs real leaders in faith that government is focused on the needs of its citizens. WILAT is achieving this aim by bringing together Maine's government and youth leaders to create positive change with a sense of passion and commitment on behalf of Maine citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal Starr, and thank you both. Let's go to questions. David Osborne.
The thing I think a lot of us in reading your application we're looking for is data on the impact of this program. What have the actual results been?
Well, I've outlined some of them, but certainly reducing the foster care population safely and responsibly by a third in just 4 years is the most remarkable.
And that's because of WILAT?
It's probably the primary contributor to that reform. Because what it takes to reform a child welfare system is what I call collective consciousness raising. People who have been devoting their careers to children have to acknowledge that the work they've done hasn't achieved the outcomes that they've hoped for. The youth have been so powerful in communicating that message in a way that I never can.
Kathleen Kennedy Townsend.
I think that it was great to hear you. Actually, my question is, maybe you changed your culture, and that involving youth was part of it, but your statistics may have come from something else that was going on, not just the engagement of young people. Although that's a very compelling story, that's not what really gave you the results that you've achieved.
I can tell you that we spent about 2.5 years in our reform effort with very little progress until we finally woke up and said we need to get youth involved at every level. Youth through WILAT are involved in all 3 branches of government. They're working with judges, they're working with legislators, and they're training our staff, training our foster and adoptive parents. It's that breadth of youth involvement that I think really led to these changes.
I think we're all impressed by the progress you've made, but the question remains, is there any independent study which says basically that the program has led to these results or has been a major factor in these results? We're looking for the cause and effect question.
Sure. And I just need to keep coming back to, we tried the traditional efforts, the efforts that most states go through, and our efforts didn't really yield the success we had hoped for until we involved youth at every level. And no, we don't have an independent study that can point to WILAT as the sole determinant for these outcomes, but we believe it was the primary contributor.
Thank you. Ron Curtis.
May I ask another way, Mr. Director, and I did read, I think what you've done on the advocacy part has been remarkable, but on one hand, when I hear that you, because to me the universe of kids in need of foster care is what it is. So if I hear you've had a third reduction in that, my concern then, does that mean those kids are not being served? Or give me some comfort when you tell me we've reduced them by a third, that those kids aren't just now out there, you know, getting no service at all.
It's both the front end and the exits from foster care. We've seen more kids exit to adoption, reunification, and we've seen more kids remain in their families safely because of safety planning, where the youth is actually involved in the what we call family team meetings.
Yeah, Anthony Williams.
I think this is blatantly irresponsible, but as someone who was adopted myself, I salute you all for what you're doing, just personally. It's God's work.
Well, that completes our questioning. And Crystal Star Castro and Daniel Despard, thank you very much, and congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, we've now had 5 of the 15 presentations. We're a third of the way through. There is a scheduled break of 20 minutes. Given the hour and the time, could we make that about 10? Make it a brief break. The restroom's nearby, and we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you.